There's always been lots of nonsense, lots of stuff that's taught to be true or that's not quite right or just flat out wrong. It's always been there in combat sports and martial arts, and in some ways it used to be worse. Like, in the 70s and the 80s, lifting weights made you slow. So don't lift weights. If you're a boxer or a kickboxer or a martial artist, you shouldn't lift weights because it makes you slow. Or don't have sex the night before a fight or the week before a fight, or because I don't know, weakens your legs or takes. I don't know what the reason was for that. But that kind of mythology is out there. And normally, when I see stupid stuff, whatever, it's part of it. It's there. I ignore it. I let it go. I move on. But lately, and it's a sign of the times, what's been happening is things trend. They catch on. And so this elastic recoil mythology, one channel started talking about it a lot, and then pop, other channels start making videos using that term because it's a search term or whatever. But literally now, millions of people have viewed videos on punching harder with elastic recoil or using elastic recoil to blah, blah, blah. Millions. And there's only 200,000 people training the martial arts in the United States. So that's a big problem. I'm going to start more simple and then get more complex as I go along. I'm going to get more scientific and specific about the elastic recoil myth. The easiest way to debunk elastic recoil is simply to say, that's not how it works. It doesn't work that way. There is no elastic recoil in human physiology, with the exception of the lungs upon exhalation. So, if you're talking about a slinky, if you're talking about a rubber band, if you're talking about a non-living elastomer, then you can talk about elastic recoil. But if you're talking about human beings, human physiology, human anatomy, human kinesiology, there's no place that you can accurately use the term elastic recoil unless you are talking about the lungs contracting upon exhalation. But in locomotion, in neuromuscular, skeletal muscular locomotion, movement, force production, it doesn't exist. It's like talking to somebody and they say, irregardless of what you read in your fancy books. Okay, can we end the discussion because you just used a word that's not real? Boom. So, one video compared Triple G's hook to Canelo's hook and said Triple G has a more powerful hook because Triple G uses elastic recoil. And the premise was that Triple G first rotates his body and then lets his fist whip around after his body's turned, and Canelo turns his fist with his body, and therefore, because Triple G has elastic recoil, Triple G has the more powerful hook. they're two variations of a hook. I even heard somebody say, when I try to teach people the right way to throw the hook, no, it's not right or wrong. They're variations. There's different places, different times, different situations where one might be better than the other. Getting off track. It's not the mythological elastic recoil that makes the first hook more powerful than the second hook. The simplest, Akim's razor, the simplest thing is that on this elastic recoil hook, the fist travels in a wider arc for a longer distance. Your rear hand is more powerful than your lead hand because it travels a greater distance. That's it. It's a bigger punch, it's a longer punch, it's going to be more powerful. That's the simplest way to break it down. The elastic recoil doesn't exist. Alright, so if you actually watched Canelo and Triple G, you would see that both fighters used multiple variations of the hook. And not only did they use this hook, they used that hook. Turn the body first and turn the body with the elbow, with the fist. They used both variations, both fighters. So that should debunk that video. Also, the more powerful hook, when you turn your body first, the glenohumeral joint, not the shoulder joint. I'm getting technical on you guys. Sorry, it's going to happen. The shoulder is not a joint. The shoulder is a girdle consisting of several joints and several bones. But when most people talk about the shoulder joint, they mean the glenohumeral joint, the GH joint. This is full horizontal abduction or horizontal extension. The more you move a joint in one direction, the more you can move it in the other direction. So you've increased the operating range of motion for the humerus to travel. It's a bigger punch. Think about this. If elastic recoil were a thing, if you could whip your trunk and then store up some, have some magic elastic recoil happen that will shoot this, right? First of all, this little demonstration that I did, if this elastic recoil thing happened, I wouldn't be able to hold my arm. I wouldn't be able to hold it still, would it? It would go, oh my God. I wouldn't be able to control it if it was that powerful. But if this thing, elastic recoil, were real, how would other sports look? How would golf look? How would the 100-meter sprint look? How would gymnastics look? Think about it. It's ridiculous. Now, people start getting confused, and maybe some of my audience, actually I know people in my audience that have education in exercise sciences and sports physiology and you might be thinking, well, but there is such a thing as stored elastic energy, and there is such a thing as the stretch reflex, and you would be correct. However, stored elastic energy happens with all muscular movement, And that is not elastic recoil, and it's especially not what these people are mythologically speaking of. Stretch reflex, or myotic reflex, is phenomenal. It's awesome. Is that happening when you rotate your body first and then maybe to a small degree? And there's a stretch reflex anytime there's a rapid contraction. But the reason the first hook is more powerful than the second hook is mechanical reasons and distance traveled. That's it. It's that simple. Anybody that talks about elastic recoil is a fraud. Don't listen to them. It's the other reason I'm putting this out here. People misuse the term biomechanics all the time, and it's been so abused and so thrown around that it's given room for functional fitness, functional exercise frauds to come in and say, "Oh yeah, well we don't follow the biomechanical model," because so many people are throwing around the term biomechanics with no education in physics, mathematics, engineering, or mechanics, or biology, or biomechanics, or exercise mechanics. No education whatsoever. They just throw some terms around, Google this term, put it together, and then say, "Oh, well, it's the bone stacking." Bone stacking is not a biomechanical term. The abuse of, really, Google. People Google a little term and then fit it into the things that they kind of already know and then use fancy terms to try and explain. It's a real problem. So let me get back to the point. The reason I'm talking about this, I want you to start being able to tell who's full of shit and who you should listen to. Part of the reason that I specifically wanted to debunk the elastic recoil myth is, there's a lot of fraudulent information and misconceptions and wrong information and disinformation. There's a lot of just bullshit out there, and some of it's not so bad. But this particular myth really bothered me, and the reason that it bothered me is because of where it comes from. In martial arts, in combat sports, it's almost like a Napoleonic complex. There are haters, there are weenies, there are yeah but guys, yeah but, that are not athletic, and they are not genetically inclined towards athleticism, and so they denounce, they resent, they downplay athleticism, and that creates an environment where myths like elastic recoil grow out of. Oh, it's not his muscles that makes him strong, it's the elastic recoil. And see, guys with muscles can't fight, but all movement requires skeletal muscle to move. And fast, explosive movement requires fast, explosive muscles. That's what athleticism is. So, this folklore that lies within the woo-woo arts, the old mystic martial arts. Skill is everything. Skill is paramount. And what is so amazing about the martial arts is that a smaller person can overcome a larger person with skill, by using skill, assuming that the larger person is less skilled. But that has morphed into a bad environment. It's morphed into an acceptable disdain for athleticism. And if these things were, if these attitudes were true, then if muscles aren't important, if strength isn't important, if power isn't important, if precision beats power, then why are PEDs banned? Why do we have weight classes? Don't be stupid, okay? Athleticism is an important part to competition, to fighting. And if you are not athletic and you train the martial arts, you become more athletic. Don't allow yourself to have a disdain for athleticism. Strive to become more athletic.